It all began when Shu, riding high on the confidence of a crackhead, shouted a marriage proposal to his home teacher, Hinata. The moment was as chaotic as it was unexpected. Hinata, taken aback, laughed, wondering if the crazy lad had lost his last brain cells. "I'll consider your marriage proposal when you grow much bigger," she replied, a playful smirk on her face. Determined, Shu pressed her to specify just how big she wanted him to be before she would take his proposal seriously. "Come on, sensei, just give me a number," he insisted, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Hinata, wanting to shake off the persistent little gremlin, casually assured him, "I'll consider your proposal when you're mature enough." Fast forward a few years, and Shu had actually enrolled in an actual school. He still carved out time to visit Hinata occasionally, bringing his chaotic energy with him. However, a few years down the road, his visits abruptly ceased, leaving Hinata wondering if academy life was the reason Shu had stopped coming around. One evening, with a beer in hand, Hinata found herself missing Shu's wild antics. No other student had ever given her such headaches, and once her students departed for the day, the stark loneliness hit her hard, like an ice truck crashing into her heart. She took a long swig from her bottle, feeling the weight of being 35 and still single as a dollar bill. As she reminisced about Shu's wild confession and her promise to consider his marriage proposal when he grew up, she couldn't shake the feeling that he had probably moved on. After joining the academy, he must be living his best life, surrounded by a harem of senior school baddies, long since abandoning his little cougar crush phase. Feeling desperate and 50 shades of loneliness, Hinata grabbed her phone, ready to scroll through dating apps in search of an emotionally stable sugar daddy. Just as she was about to dive into the digital dating pool, the doorbell rang. Assuming it was the delivery man with her takeout, she rushed to the door, feeling certain it was her food arriving. But when she opened the door, she froze at the sight before her. Standing there was a 6-foot thirst trap, radiating confidence and charm. "Sensei," he called out, a grin spreading across his face. Stunned to her core, Hinata heard this buffed-up version of Shu introduce himself. "It's me, Shu," he declared, standing at the threshold like a model from a magazine. He looked like he had stepped out of a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure episode, all glammed up and glowing. "Shu?" Hinata stammered, her mind rebooting like Windows XP. She couldn't believe her eyes. The once naughty little leech had transformed into a Hollywood sweetheart right before her. Shu misread Hinata's silence as another hard rejection, scratching his head in confusion. Had being buffed somehow made him less attractive to her? Just as doubt began to creep in, Hinata exclaimed, "You're definitely my type." However, as she clocked his school uniform, reality hit her. "Wait a minute, you're still a student," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Shu confirmed that he had come straight to her apartment from school, and Hinata couldn't help but remark, "You should have at least waited until graduation to drop this confession." But Shu, ever stubborn, declared, "I've already waited long enough." His obsession with Hinata had begun years ago, back when he was just an innocent young boy. He remembered the day he opened the door to his parents' apartment and found Hinata standing at the threshold. The moment his eyes landed on her, his entire soul hit pause. Even as Hinata asked to see his parents, he just stood there, completely mesmerized. Just then, Shu's mom appeared, slapped some sense into his big head, and scolded him for gawking like a useless idiot instead of saying hello. "At least be polite," she chided. Hinata, ever the professional, inquired if they'd be interested in her trial classes, but Shu's mom declined, saying they had no need for home tutoring. Hearing this, young Shu, who had never cared about English in his life, started wailing like a demon being exorcised. Eventually, his Oscar-worthy breakdown worked, and his mom caved. Hinata began teaching him pronunciation, and during one lesson, she demonstrated how to say lemon with her tongue. But noticing how thick Hinata's tongue was, Shu realized this was no ordinary tongue. It was a tongue built for the rod, which completely ruined his sanity. When Shu finally joined the academy, his short gremlin friends mocked his crush on Hinata as a mere cougar obsession, which enraged him. One lanky friend suggested that Hinata was probably married by now, fueling Shu's fury. Comfortingly, another pudgy friend consoled him, noting they'd all be adults soon. But this friend quickly dampened Shu's hopes by adding that without a hot face, Hinata might still reject him. Hearing this, Shu became paranoid as hell. He made it his life's mission to visit Hinata daily, just to ensure she wasn't getting scooped up by some random dude. During one of those visits, he discovered that Hinata had a thing for baseball players. So, like the dedicated simp he was, he immediately signed up for the school's baseball team in hopes of impressing her. Unfortunately, during one of their training sessions, he tragically got injured. The doctor informed him that he had a lump on his shin bone and wouldn't be able to continue playing baseball or any physical sports at all. Consequently, due to his lack of engagement in physical activities, Shu experienced rapid puberty. His body beefed up overnight, and his face suddenly looked like that of a 40-year-old YouTuber going through a midlife crisis. The sudden transformation, however, spiraled him into anxiety and depression, forcing him to stop visiting Hinata. During this time, a sweet girl named Fuji confessed her feelings for him, but Shu turned her down almost immediately. This infuriated his friends, who insisted on knowing if he was rejecting her because she was shorter than Kevin Hart on a tricycle and didn't have enough beaver beans. Shu simply replied, "I have feelings for someone else, someone not even in our school." As Fuji sadly left, Shu's friends berated him angrily, shouting at him to ditch his sugar mama obsession and settle down with a sweet girl like Fujieda. Frustrated, they reminded him that he hadn't seen Hinata in forever, and showing up out of the blue would freak her out. But Shu was determined. He knew he had an advantage now. He looked more like Hinata's favorite baseball player than the scrawny kid he once was. Still, his friends tried one last time to knock some sense into him, painting the worst-case scenario. What if Hinata is married to some trailer park hobo with 5 little gremlins calling her mommy? One of them exclaimed. Despite their warnings, Shu stood firm. He was ready to take the plunge, believing that he could win Hinata over with his newfound confidence and looks. And here he was, standing in the present before a stunned Hinata. She still couldn't believe that her former snot-nosed brat of a student had transformed into a walking thirst trap. Shu, on the other hand, was equally taken aback. Even after all these years, Hinata was still ridiculously cute. Just then, he noticed Hinata's face flush red. Before he could say anything, she asked him to chill, claiming she was drunk. However, she admitted that even if she was tipsy, marrying Shu was tough due to their 17-year age gap. After much consideration, she blurted out that they could never be together because, in her eyes, Shu would always remain a young'un with snot in his nose. Before she could finish her statement, Shu suddenly embraced Hinata out of nowhere, loudly declaring, "I'm now a man with a matured pickle." Hinata pushed him away, insisting that they could never date. "Even with your glow-up, I still see you as a boy," she exclaimed. She remarked that hugging her like a grown man didn't make him one. "It's rude for you to just show up unannounced, especially at this late hour," she added, poking Shu's chest. "You don't know jack about marriage and shouldn't be talking about making me your wife. You have no clue about supporting a family or even securing a 9-to-5 job." Hinata went on to emphasize that marriage wasn't child's play. Until you become a full-fledged member of society, get a credit score, or even life insurance, you shouldn't be talking about getting a wife. Shu, however, was not concerned with her yapping. He was too busy getting turned on by Hinata's aggression. Sensing that Shu wasn't even paying attention, Hinata began shoving him toward the door, urging him to leave. Suddenly, Shu turned and demanded, "What if I got a job? Would you take me seriously then?" Hinata replied, "That's the proper thing to do." But placing her hand over her face in frustration, she noted that even with him getting a job, it still didn't erase the fact that he was still immature. "I'm 17 years older than you, which basically makes me your mom's age," she declared, standing her ground. Hinata recounted her own struggles, painfully recalling how she was a certified washed-up loner with 0 hobbies, who did nothing but drink beer all day. "The only thing I'm good at is speaking Queen's English, which isn't even worth a peanut," she lamented. She recalled her ex dumping her like trash for being dull in bed, and for not knowing how to arch her back properly whenever it was time to get intimate. "Whenever we were in the mood for some intense clapping, I always looked for an excuse not to develop the plot," she exclaimed, her frustration evident. After that harsh breakup, Hinata deemed herself romantically hopeless. "Honestly, Shu," she warned, "instead of dating a walking boredom like me, you'd be better off dating a donkey." She advised him that it would be better if he found a cute, bubbly girl his age, rather than an old rusty engine who would soon hit menopause. But then, with a serious expression, Shu suddenly asked Hinata if she liked him. Frustrated, Hinata replied, "You've been asking me the same question since you were a young boy. My answer has always been to pat your head playfully and declare that I love you as my student, of course." Seeing tears welling in Hinata's eyes, Shu grabbed her hand, smiled, and kissed it gently. "I will always love you," he vowed, making Hinata blush. "I can tell you're drunk," he said, chuckling softly. "I'm sorry for having such an important conversation at such a terrible time, but with everything you've said, I assure you I'll think about my future and become a full-fledged member of society. But I will never stop confessing my feelings for you until you cave." Hinata remained adamant, insisting that Shu focus on finding young baddies on Instagram or in school and leave her alone. However, with a smirk, Shu stubbornly countered, "I won't do that. I've been pining over you for a good 8 years. At this point, I don't want to rush you into anything. You can take your time, but I won't condone you calling yourself boring and old. To me, you're cute and mischievous, even if you can be scatterbrained and sloppy. I love you just like that." Increasing his Riz points, Shu passionately declared, "Ever since the first time I laid eyes on you, you've been my son." Hearing the compliment, Hinata immediately became flustered, lost in the moment, but she quickly snapped out of it, shoving Shu's hands from her face. "You only call me your son because my name, Hinata, means son," she exclaimed. Hinata firmly asserted that she was acting as if he knew her, but honestly, he hadn't really seen the real her. Sighing, she advised him to think carefully about what he wanted, given that he was still young and had his whole future ahead of him. "I'll eventually grow older, and my once thick body will start to wrinkle. I might not be able to satisfy your cultured creamy cravings the way young baddies could," she said, her tone serious. In response, Shu confidently asserted, "I alone get to choose what I want. To state it clearly, I've thought about our age difference and decided to live in the present. For now, I love you, Hinata, and I'm not worried about what lies ahead in the future." With a smirk, Shu assured her, "I will never change, and I plead with you to believe in me." Hinata responded, acknowledging his sincerity but reminding him that one thing was certain. Humans change, and she would change one day. Teasingly, Shu quipped, "If you ever change, I really hope it's into someone who loves me." Hearing this, Hinata playfully smacked him on the head. "Now, get out of here. It's getting late." But Shu stubbornly mentioned that even if he left, he would always return. Before leaving, he informed Hinata, "By the way, I just turned 18 today, so legally speaking, we could get married." However, Hinata replied, "Marriage involves both partners being willing." This prompted Shu to vow, "I'm going to work very hard so you'll stop seeing me as a boy and start seeing me as a real sausage bearer." Flabbergasted, Hinata stared at him, her mouth agape. Shu insisted he would keep returning, hinting that being 18 meant they could do anything as adults. This caused Hinata to nearly choke on air. With a playful grin, Shu departed, promising to come back. As Hinata retreated inside, she exhaled in relief, but just then, her emotions overwhelmed her, and she started to cry. Regretting ever allowing a boy 17 years younger than her to see her in such a vulnerable state, she felt a wave of sadness wash over her. Eventually calming down, Hinata took off her flip-flops, reflecting on how Shu, who used to be a sneaky hellraiser as a youngster, had suddenly grown up to be such a calm and collected guy. Taking off her jacket, she muttered under her breath that if Shu kept coming back so persistently, it was only a matter of time before she started catching feelings. With her clothes finally off, she strutted into the bathroom, reasoning that hearing Shu speak so calmly had made her feel watery down there. Tearfully, she recalled her ex dumping her like trash for her lack of clapping skills. At that moment, she began to wonder if Shu could be the man who could heal her broken heart and mend her shattered ego. But instantly, Hinata slapped her face to regain her lost senses, sternly reminding herself to think with her brain, not with her mushy feelings. Angrily stepping into the bathroom, she resolved that dating or marrying someone 17 years younger was impossible. Gazing at her reflection in the mirror, she noticed that her once perky balloons were now pointing south, and her snatched waist was slowly obeying the laws of gravity. "I wouldn't want anyone to see my flabby body, let alone Shu," she muttered, nervously recalling Shu's "do anything" comment. She wondered if by doing anything, Shu intended to pipe her. Meanwhile, strolling home, Shu's phone buzzed with a text from Fujieda, the girl he had rejected. She apologized for being too thirsty and desperate, pleading to stay friends. Shu texted back, affirming their friendship, but when she asked to call, he declined, leaving her message unread. The exchange made Shu realize he had forgotten to get Hinata's contact info. The following day, Shu stood in front of Hinata's doorstep, complimenting her on how lovely she looked before professing his love for her. Hinata, on the other hand, felt a mix of anger and butterflies in her stomach. "Listen, if you've come to hang out, I'm not letting you inside my apartment since you're no longer my student," she sternly pointed out. Shu casually remarked, "I'm cool just standing outside your door, as long as I get to see your face." Glancing at her black turtleneck blouse, he praised how perfectly it showed the curves of her maxi chest globes. His flirty compliments only irritated Hinata, who thought he was just one of those smooth-talking guys trying to get a taste of her honeypot and then dip, especially after Shu's bold, doing anything remark the previous day. Placing her hand over her chin, Hinata mused that the Shu she knew was naive, but this Shu was making it clear that his only goal was to see the color of her pants. Abruptly snapping her from her thoughts, Shu announced, "I have something important to discuss with you." Straight to the point, Shu mentioned that he wanted to talk about his career path. Realizing that Shu wanted to discuss something other than creaming her cakes, Hinata started to show curiosity. Shu jumped right into the matter, informing Hinata that once he graduated from school, he would love to join the workforce. However, he further stated that there weren't many job opportunities for upper school grads. Hinata agreed with what Shu said, but then advised him to aim high or he would continue to be a broke nobody. Hinata advised Shu that while money was important, doing something he enjoyed was equally crucial. "If you rush into anything you don't enjoy, you're going to regret it," she said, her tone serious yet encouraging. Smiling, Shu asked, "So you mean I should take my time to decide?" "Exactly," Hinata confirmed, suggesting that a personal connection to his career was the best approach. Using herself as an example, she informed Shu, "After jumping from job to job, I realized that being an English language teacher was my true calling." Curiously, Hinata then asked Shu what he loved doing. He revealed, "I like working close to the airport as an airplane mechanic." Upon hearing this, Hinata's eyes glistened with excitement. "That's wonderful. You'll get to repair airplanes that soar across the sky," she exclaimed. "Being an airplane mechanic would be a major challenge, but I'm sure you're up to the task." However, Hinata warned him that to become an airplane mechanic, he would need to attend a technical school. Then, growing suspicious, she demanded to know why Shu was seeking her advice on his career path. In response, Shu confidently declared, "It's because we're going to marry." This enraged Hinata, who shouted, "How long are you going to persist with this nonsense?" "Until you have a boyfriend," Shu playfully quipped. Frustrated, Hinata screamed, "My stance against marrying the student hasn't changed." Shu calmly acknowledged her point, but suggested, "You'll just need to wait for me for another 3 years. This triggered a flashback for Hinata, recalling the time years ago when Shu had shown up at her apartment looking glum. He had informed her that he wouldn't be able to visit her every week like he used to because it was no longer possible for him. Curious, Hinata had demanded to know why, but little Shu had just fallen silent, as if a cat had suddenly snatched his tongue. Sensing his unease, Hinata changed the subject, asking how school and baseball practices were going. Shu responded that school was fine, but with baseball, it was unfortunate that he wouldn't be able to play for long. Puzzled, Hinata asked why, but Shu fell silent again. Out of nowhere, he demanded, "Will you stay forever?" Hinata replied, "I'm not immortal, but as long as I have students to teach and I'm in good health, I'll teach for a very long time." This brought a smile to Shu's face. "Why are you acting dumb by asking if I'm immortal?" Hinata teased. "There's no reason," Shu replied, shrugging it off. He mentioned that he would be heading home, but as he moved to leave, he turned and asked Hinata not to go anywhere until he returned for her. With a nervously serious expression, he screamed, "Just keep waiting for me." Returning to the present, Hinata giggled and asked Shu why he had abruptly stopped visiting back then, teasingly assuming he had found a girlfriend. Quickly, Shu denied it, explaining instead that severe growing pains in his hips had been the cause. Hinata pointed out, "I would have loved to wait for you for 3 years, but by then, menopause would have dried up my insides like an abandoned well." Shu tried to counter her statement, but before he could, Hinata quickly asked, "Are there going to be chicks at the aviation technical school you plan to enroll in later?" This question was intended to get Shu off her back, but it only infuriated him. He immediately grabbed her and affirmed, "Even if there are girls, I'm only interested in you." Seeing how aggressive Shu was, Hinata was shocked. At that moment, she realized the situation wasn't child's play anymore. Just then, Shu thanked Hinata for her life coaching advice and reassured her, "Even though it might take a little more time, I beg you to be patient with me." Shu pointed out that until he returned for Hinata, he would need her to wait for him. Watching Shu depart, Hinata struggled to grasp the absurd love tangle and figured she had to do something drastic about the situation. Meanwhile, as Shu strolled home, he felt like a total nutjob for even thinking about asking Hinata to wait for him for another 3 years. Lost in thought, Shu wished he could secure a good career immediately after graduating from school to be more ambitious. He also wished he could land a job that paid more than what Hinata earned as a teacher. But then, the thought of Hinata possibly finding a boyfriend in 3 years made his head spin. The idea of being stranded like a complete loser was terrifying. Determined, Hinata stepped into her apartment, resolving it was high time she put an end to Shu's weird simp obsession with her once and for all. Yet, despite her resolve, she figured the best way to do that was to decisively reject his advances for good. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a notification. Upon checking, she saw it was from the dating site she had downloaded earlier, but hadn't used. Hinata had initially intended to create a profile, but the memory of Shu pleading with her to wait flooded her mind, leaving her emotional. However, she shut it down immediately, reminding herself she wasn't some fairy tale princess waiting for her Prince Charming. She was a grown woman, and the best way to fix this mess was to vanish from Shu's sight permanently, for his own good. Meanwhile, the following day at school, the rejected girl, Fujieda, summoned Shu's buddies and demanded to know why Shu had been avoiding her, like she had herpes. Shu's friends were nervous and unsure of how to respond. Noticing their silence, she pressed them, demanding to know if they were really Shu's homies or just NPCs in his life. Hesitantly, the boys affirmed they had known Shu since they were young. With their identity crisis settled, Fujieda demanded to know who the mystery chick was that had so completely captivated Shu, making it difficult for her to win him over. In response, the boys anxiously claimed ignorance. For clarity's sake, Fujieda questioned if Shu really had a girl he was obsessed with, or if he was just lying to get her off his back. Getting fed up with the interrogation, the lanky friend was on the verge of snitching, but the chunky friend with the Ninja Turtle haircut cut him off immediately. He told Fujieda that Shu only said he had someone to avoid hurting her feelings, adding that Shu had fabricated the silly excuse just to turn her down. Confused, Fujieda demanded to know why Shu would go that far instead of just coming clean like a normal human. Smoothly, the fatso spun another lie that would surprise even the devil, claiming Shu was too busy figuring out his post-graduation life to even think about dating. At those words, a dark cloud overshadowed Fujieda's expression as she inquired if Shu was a Gabriel. Shocked at hearing this, the chubby boy vehemently denied it, making it clear that Shu was all about the melons and had zero interest in sausages. Relieved, Fujieda activated her competitive spirit and vowed to go even harder for Shu's heart. The following week, after school, Shu thought about visiting Hinata at home but hesitated, thinking that visiting her every day would make him look like some next-level stalker. Just then, he was struck by a galaxy moment and thought it would be smart to get a part-time job to do in his spare time. That way, he could flex for Hinata with an expensive date. Before he could marinate on that thought, Fujieda suddenly entered his class, asking if he was heading home. Shu confirmed he was and then asked if she was also. However, instead of replying, Fujieda started to yap about how she had been spending her free time hanging out and socializing. This took Shu by surprise, since he had always pegged her as a die-hard introvert. He threw in a compliment, making Fujieda blush. Quickly changing the subject, she pointed out that after graduation, she would be attending an art class since she had received a scholarship. Then, she demanded to know Shu's plans after graduation. Shu confidently replied, informing Fujieda that he would be attending a specialty school. Fujieda asked why, since she had always assumed Shu would attend college. Shu replied, saying he had considered college, but a few things made him have a change of heart. Upon hearing this, Fujieda asked if his decision was because of the girl he was singing over, which made Shu kind of uncomfortable. He told her he would be taking his leave, but as he tried to dip, Fujieda grabbed his jacket, asking him to wait. With a flustered face, she shyly asked if he could do her a favor. Shortly afterward, in the art room, Shu, standing on a chair, nearly accidentally toppled a few sculptures off the table. However, he steadied himself and finally held a sculpture in his hand. Looking down, he asked Fujieda if that was the one she wanted, and the short girl with a bright face confirmed it was. She then informed Shu that she had won second place at an exhibition with that sculpture. As Shu brought down the sculpture and gently placed it on a table, Fujieda, with a flustered face, told him that the sculpture was modeled after her body. Hearing this, Shu, whose hand was unknowingly grabbing onto the ridiculously BL melons of the curvy sculpture, hastily tried to take off his hand. When he eventually did, he handed the sculpture to Fujieda with his head bowed, trembling like a useless virgin. While Fujieda, seeing how nervous he was, called him cute and laughed. Taking off her hairband, she assured him that her floaties weren't as big as that of the sculpture. However, with her hair now down, she informed Shu that she and the sculpture beauty had the same face. Admittedly, Shu said she was right, and then pointed out that he had never seen Fujieda with her hair let down before. Grabbing hold of the sculpture, Fujieda remarked that if she had the same insane curves as the sculpture, maybe she would have been more confident, and Shu wouldn't have rejected her. In response to her statement, Shu stared at her with a dumbfounded expression. And noticing this, Fujieda apologized for persistently bringing up talks of dates. Then, she confessed that she wasn't sure she could ever let him go, with tears streaming down her face. Fujieda begged Shu to have some balls and not look away like a spineless beta male while she showed him her full assets. Fujieda pointed out that she wasn't so confident, but still wanted Shu to know her inside and out. Nervously, however, Shu stood frozen, apologizing and firmly declining, stating he wasn't interested in watching her OnlyFans content. This statement upset Fujieda, who angrily burst into uncontrollable sobs. Frantically unbuttoning her jacket and yelling that she was dead serious about him, Shu hurriedly grabbed her, trying so hard to restrict her from giving him an uncensored view of her plots for free. Fujieda screamed stubbornly, asking Shu to let go. Shu tried explaining that her plots were supposed to be seen by only someone truly special to her. Yet insistently, Fujieda claimed that special person was him. Passionately lost in the moment, Fujieda vented her frustration, explaining that Shu had always been so kind and gentle to her, which made her fall madly in love with him. She insisted that Shu could do anything he wanted with her body. However, on seeing that the girl had completely lost her mind, Shu took his hand off her and sincerely declared that till the end of the world, he would only see her as a friend. In addition, Shu pointed out that he just couldn't return the feelings, no matter how hard he tried. Just then, Fujieda urgently asked Shu to take a look. And as he did, Shu's brain nearly exploded like an atomic bomb when he noticed Fujieda's bra was off, with her melons saying hi. Shocked, Shu swiftly snatched his jacket, apologized, and bolted as fast as his legs could carry him, leaving Fujieda heartbroken and humiliated. Frantically, Shu dashed off the school grounds, collapsing behind a shed where he wept worse than a girl. Sorrowfully, he reflected on his unwavering resolve that Hinata alone owned his heart. Overwhelmed memories of his last visit to Han's crib flooded back. Meanwhile, in Hinata's crib, she had a bunch of little gremlins who were all hyped up to learn the English language like they were about to speedrun Duolingo. However, despite her efforts to be upbeat for them, she couldn't shake a lingering gloom that day. Noticing their teacher's dull energy, the little menaces asked if something was bothering her, and one particular nosy girl suggested Hinata had boy problems and was in love. Hinata, stunned at the audacity, asked how she knew what heartbreak looked like and if she got a boyfriend or something. The girl quickly responded by exclaiming that she had a boyfriend. In response, Hinata told the loud nuggets they were too young for such diva talk. But then, Hinata noticed a boy with his head bowed, prompting her to ask what was wrong. Instead of responding, the little weirdo just stared at her awkwardly, blushing really hard and creeping Hinata out. Suddenly, the creepy boy blurted out a compliment, calling Hinata the prettiest girl he'd ever seen. Flustered, Hinata thanked him playfully, tapping his lips and calling him a sweet boy, sparking laughter from the other young'uns who dubbed the boy a little simp in love with their teacher. But Hinata immediately hushed the little loudmouths and announced the start of the English lesson. Hours passed, and as the lesson came to an end, the rest of the Rugrats bid Hinata a goodbye, but that particular shy little dude just stood at the door with his head bowed. Concerned, Hinata asked what the problem was, to which the leech responded by asking if he should respond in English language or Japanese. Hinata replied, telling him to answer in whatever language he was comfortable with. With that, the lad looked Hinata straight in the eye and then shouted to know if she had a boyfriend. Upon hearing this question, Hinata was shocked because that line was way too familiar, reminding her of none other than Shu. But the last thing she wanted was another mini nutcase trying to wife her, so she thought it best just to lie and tell the rascal that she had a boyfriend. Being a terrible liar, Hinata replied, stammering that she wasn't sure she had one. That said, the tot was about to shoot his shot before his buddy interrupted, calling him TGO and urging that he hurry up so they could leave. Unable to express his feelings, TGO groaned in frustration and then reluctantly bid Hinata goodbye. Sadly, this reminded Hinata of her loneliness, prompting her to retreat inside, grab her phone, and scroll through the dating app for an older match. Unexpectedly, she noticed an e-flyer of a matchmaking party looking for single participants. Skimming through the flyer, Hinata noticed that the party venue was pretty close and would be attended by top dignitaries, making her reason that attending the party could connect her with mature men for a sensible romance. But then she remembered the promise she made to young Shu to marry him when he turned 18 and started to feel awful at the mere thought of crushing his dream. But then again, with the enormous age difference between them, Hinata reasoned that when Shu would become 30, she would be 55. And then she would be one saggy wrinkle away from him cheating on her with a younger model. However, deep in her heart, she knew Shu wasn't the type of guy to be so heartless. Still, Hinata was of the opinion that she would be more at ease getting a man her age or older. With that in mind, Hinata was resolute to attend the matchmaking party, believing it would work out. But even with everything concluded, Hinata still felt something was missing and couldn't get Shu off her mind. She thought about how days earlier she had scrolled through the dating app in search of older men, and still didn't find any guy that tickled her fancy. Even though she wasn't sure about having anything to do with Shu, one thing was certain. Anytime she looked at him, there was this intense feeling in her chest. Hinata thought about how Shu was cool-headed and tall, and whenever he laughed, his smile made her feel all kinds of emotions at once. He was kind and composed, and even though the age difference made it seem impossible for them to be together, Hinata knew that any girl Shu would bag would be a lucky girl. Plopping down on the floor, Hinata started to drool, reminiscing about all the sweet words Shu had said to her over the past couple of days. Suddenly, she was jerked from her thoughts by the sound of the doorbell, making her wonder if Shu could be the one at the door. At that thought, Hinata began to freak out, questioning how it was possible for Shu to be at the door when she was just thinking about him. However, she immediately tapped her head a couple of times, reminding herself that she was an adult and should be able to handle situations like this. She stood up and started to move toward the door. Just as she opened it to find Shu standing there, she asked, "Why aren't you wearing a jacket in this cold?" But at that moment, she observed Shu's gloomy expression and demanded to know what was wrong.